All right, today we're going to dive into a topic that's, well, pretty tricky, but absolutely essential if you spend any time on YouTube. We're talking about the platform's defamation policy. Whether you're a creator, you run a business, or you're just a user, knowing these rules is so important for protecting yourself online.
So let's just jump right into it with a scenario. Imagine someone posts a video and it's full of flat out lies about you or your business. It's out there, it's getting views, and it's really hurting your reputation. So what can you actually do about it? Well, the answer is a bit complicated, and it all starts with understanding one very specific term.
Okay, so before we can even talk about how to fix the problem, we need to be crystal clear on what the problem is. What does defamation actually mean when we're talking about the internet and platforms like YouTube? Here it is in the simplest terms. Defamation is a false statement about someone or something, a person, a business, that causes real harm to their reputation. Now, the two key words you have to lock in on here are false and harms. It can't just be a negative comment or someone being mean. It has to be an untrue claim that actually causes damage. Let's look at a really clear example. Imagine a video says, quote, "Mr. Rahul Sharma is a fraud and steals money from his clients." Now, if that's not true, it isn't just an insult. It's a very specific, factual claim that's being presented as the truth. And that is a classic example of what could be considered a defamatory statement. And this brings us to the most critical distinction of all when it comes to defamation, the difference between a fact and an opinion. It's a huge deal. So on one side, you have a statement like, XYZ seller is running a GST fraud. See, that's a factual claim. It can be proven true or false. But on the other side, you have, my experience, bad customer service. That's just someone's opinion, right? It's their personal experience. And legally, that is a world of difference. Opinions, even really harsh ones, are generally protected as free speech and are not considered defamation. So, if the line between fact and opinion is so important, who makes the call? You might think it's YouTube's job to decide, but you might be surprised. The platform's official position is actually to stay out of it. Let's dig into why.
This quote right here, this is the absolute heart of YouTube's policy. YouTube cannot decide what is true or false. That is a matter for a court of law. Basically, they're saying, hey, we are not the judge and jury here. They see themselves as a neutral platform for hosting content, not as the arbiters of truth between two people having a dispute.
And because of that super neutral stance, getting YouTube to actually take action on a defamation claim, well, it's an uphill battle. You can't just flag a video and hope for the best. You need to provide rock-solid evidence, explain exactly why the statements are false, and very often, the only thing that will make them act is an official court order. Okay, so knowing how high that bar is set, what are your options? What can you actually do? Let's break it down into a practical 3-step action plan you can use to make your first moves. Here's your game plan, and we're starting with the simplest path first. Step 1 is to just contact the uploader. If that doesn't work, step 2 is to check for other policy violations. And only then, if those fail, do you move to step 3, filing a formal defamation complaint. Let's talk about why this exact order is so important. First things first, always try the simplest, most direct route. It might sound a little too obvious, but just sending a professional, calm message to the creator can sometimes work wonders. A lot of these issues are just big misunderstandings, and you might be surprised how often someone will voluntarily take content down just to avoid a bigger fight. Now, if direct contact goes nowhere, it's time to think a little more strategically. Ask yourself, does this video break any other YouTube rules? Things like harassment, bullying, or privacy violations like sharing your personal info are often way more black and white for YouTube's moderators. Reporting a video for one of these can actually be a much faster way to get it taken down than getting bogged down in a really complex defamation claim. So if the first 2 steps don't work, now you're at step 3, filing that formal complaint. And this is where you have to be incredibly precise. You can't just write, "This whole video is a lie." You have to pinpoint the exact statements, explain why they're factually wrong, and then clearly describe how they are actually harming you or your reputation. The more specific you are, the better your chances. But what happens when even a detailed, well-written complaint isn't enough to get YouTube to take action? Well, this brings us to the final and most serious option on the table: escalating the entire issue to a court of law. Now, taking legal action can feel really intimidating, and look, it is a major step. But the process itself is pretty straightforward, even if it can be slow. You file a case, you go through the process, the court rules that the content is, in fact, defamatory, and then they issue a legal order. Once you take that official court order and submit it to YouTube, they will comply. It's definitely the longest and most expensive path, but it is the one guaranteed way to get that content removed. Whew, okay, we have covered a ton of ground, so let's just boil it all down to the absolute essentials. This is the simple framework you need to keep in your back pocket. So here it is, your cheat sheet. For something to be defamation, it has to be a false statement that harms a reputation. That's a yes. But a personal opinion or a bad review, that's a no. And this one is so important. A true statement, even if it's really damaging, is not defamation. Truth is an absolute defense. It always comes back to that 1-2 punch. It has to be both false and harmful. So we'll leave you with this big question to think about. In our hyper-connected world, where information and misinformation can spread like wildfire in an instant, where should we draw the line? Where do platforms, courts, and just all of us as users decide where free speech ends and protecting someone's reputation begins? It's really the central challenge of our modern internet, isn't it?